One of the biggest struggles I hear all of the time from my tarot students and from the lovely people like you who watch my tarot videos, it's that reading more than one card at a time is hard. But it doesn't have to be. I have got some fun, quick, and easy tips, tricks, and tools to help you really find that thread that connects multiple cards together and then feel confident telling the story that always exists when you have more than one card laid out at a time. If you don't know me, I'm Angie Green from The Simple Tarot, and The Simple Tarot is all about helping you learn how to read those cards quickly, simply, and easily so that you can then use them. That's the whole point, is using the cards for creativity, self-care, personal development, or just reading for fun, whatever you'd like. This video right here is going to help you leap your tarot understanding to the next level. You've mastered already or are in the process of mastering the individual card meanings, and you're confident reading at one card at a time, doing your daily draw or just a single card tarot spread. Maybe even a little comfortable reading two cards at a time too, especially if the cards seem really obvious and relate together. But stay with me, and I'm going to get you super confident in reading any number of cards at a time and telling that story. All right, let's go. So what is this magic secret that's going to help you become a super confident multi-card tarot reader in no time? Honestly, it's not much of a secret at all. You are already a natural storyteller because you're human. I'm going to guess you're human, but I'm pretty sure that you're human. And humans communicate with each other through stories. You already know how to do this. You're already doing this multiple times during your days. Everything you do when you communicate to someone else, and sometimes even when you communicate to yourself, you're telling a story. I'm just going to help you tell the story with the cards and with intention. Every single story has a reason for being shared, for being told. If you're a writer, you often call this the theme of the story. It's sort of the big picture underlying reason that the story exists. And for us tarot readers, I like to call this the thread of the story. So when we read more than one card at a time, we first look for that thread, that theme, that sort of that connection between all of the cards. So let's imagine you have three cards in front of you right now, and if you want to play along, just shuffle your deck and lay out three cards. It really doesn't matter what they are, but if you want to, play along, please. So when you lay out these cards, you're going to look at and you're going to see their similarities and their differences. And you already know their meanings, or you're going to look up their meanings. Maybe you know the zodiac connections and the numerology and all of that like background information. Doesn't really matter. You've already got enough info to find the thread of the story. Because usually the thread of the story is going to be very closely related to the question that you asked the cards before you laid them out. So if you asked a question about your romantic relationship, that thread is going to be tied to your relationships, your romantic relationships, or your attitude towards romance in general. Maybe your expectations, fears, and hopes about romance. The thread is about romance or about your specific romantic relationship. If you ask the cards a question about money, the thread will be related to money coming into or going out of your life. Or it's going to be related to your attitude towards money and abundance and wealth, or your history and your fears about money. So the thread is almost always tied to the question that you ask of the cards. It sort of puts a boundary box around what the story is going to be about. And I do have to point out, with tarot, the thread of the reading, the theme of it really is not usually related to the surface of the question. And people wish it was all of the time, but it rarely is. The thread is usually related to your beliefs, your thoughts, your choices, desires, or your past actions around the question. So don't stay on the surface. I want you really looking deeper. And I'll give you like an example. Let's say you ask a question about a specific romantic partner that you have, and you want the reading, the thread, you want it to be about this specific romantic partner. The cards may tell you a story about your past romantic partners and how they led you to be in this relationship today. Or they might tell you a story about your belief about romance in general and how you are sabotaging this relationship with your current romantic partner. So while you may want it on the surface to be about this partner. Really, the tarot is going to answer the question about the theme, not necessarily about the specific question you asked it, but it's going to keep the answer within the boundary box of that theme, that thread, which is much greater than just the surface level. You're going to have to dive much deeper. So once you've got a feeling for what this thread is based on your question and what the cards look like. And when I say feeling, I mean actually it's a physical feeling in your body. This is where your intuition lives. And watch this previous video. If you have a really hard time identifying where your intuition lives in your body, or if you have a hard time trusting your intuition, that video about trusting your intuition is really going to help you. But once you have this intuitive feeling about the thread and that the thread is correct and you're on the right path, then you can start looking for the story in the cards. All right, and I'm going to make a side note here. I would recommend starting this process of reading more than one card at a time by just reading 2 or 3 cards at a time. A lot of people love to jump into that 10-card Celtic cross, and it's really complicated and difficult to learn how to read multiple cards in something so complicated. Instead, I highly suggest you start with 3 cards or so and just get a lot of confidence in that, because each time you read the cards, you're strengthening those intuitive and your storytelling muscles, and it just becomes so much easier then to translate what you know about the reading with 3 cards into 10 cards instead of just trying to start with 10 cards. So make it easy on yourself, make it fun, and make your learning, make it grow naturally. So start small and then grow bigger. All right, so where are we at? We have your 2 or 3 cards or however many in your spread. You've got a question that you ask them, and then you've found the thread, and in your body, you intuitively know that the thread is right. The thread is related to the question on some deep level, and you've set your box about where your story is going to live. So this thread is sort of the through line of your story, but how do you tell that story? Every single story has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And most stories are told in that way, beginning, middle, and end. Of course, we play with story structure. Like there are movies and stories that go sort of end, middle, beginning. But really, when you're telling a story, especially when you're reading tarot cards, it's always going to be beginning, middle, and end. And in tarot, this perfectly translates into past, present, and future. And this is one reason that 3-card past, present, future tarot spread is so popular. It is absolutely made for telling stories, and it gives you a ton of information when you just have those 3 cards. But you do not have to limit yourself to just 3 cards or even just that 3-card past, present, future spread when you're trying to tell that story. Any number of cards and any tarot spread can be sorted into cards that deal with the past, that deal with the present and the future, or the beginning, middle, and end of your story. Even something much more complicated like that 10-card Celtic cross spread has card layout positions that represent the past, the present, and the future. Simple. Okay, and now I'm going to take another side note and let you know that for those of you who read predictively, meaning you use your cards for divination or future telling, fortune telling, that future position, or all of the cards that relate to the future information, that end of your story, you can read those as seeing where fate takes you or what will happen in the future. This is your destination. You're divining what will happen through your intuition or through psychic means, whatever. You're telling and predicting the future. You're telling and predicting the end of the story. But if you're like me and you don't read predictively, that works out well too. You're going to read those cards that relate to the future position or future positions in the layout as the desired end of the story or the most likely end of the story. And I always do this on the fly, but you can determine ahead of time how you want to read it. So the desired end of the story is like saying, how do I want the future to be? And then the most likely end of the story is more of a cause and effect thing where you're saying, if the past led to the present, then the present will lead to this future. And this is the most likely outcome. Again, like I said, I do this on the fly based on what card is there, but it's probably smarter to actually do it, like decide ahead of time how you're going to read those cards. So now let's take what we know and we're going to tell our story. If you are a tarot beginner, like a super beginner, it feels like you're working through this step by step by step, and you kind of are. But as you gain more experience, you start multitasking, and these things, they just sort of flow together. It will not feel quite as disjointed. But as a tarot beginner, I find it really helpful to record and write down each step. I'm a writer, so when I say write down, I actually mean write down. But you can just take photos if you're not a writer. Take photos on your phone or just use a voice memo, some way to record the information so that you can come back to it later in the future with a little bit of hindsight to see how you read the cards. But it also, I should say, like now that I read 3-card spreads most often, it's my favorite spread of all time. So I'm very confident reading 3 cards. After 6 or 7 years of reading 3-card spreads, I've read this spread thousands of times. It happens like very quickly for me. But the first few times I read it, I was spending an hour at a time, just a single 3-card spread. It does get easier and better. And like the most rapid progress is going to really happen in the beginning. So if it is taking you an hour, don't give up. Just keep at it and you will get much, much faster. And the whole thing will move much more smoothly as you get more experience. So where are we? We know each card individually, and we know their individual meanings and personalities and stories. We know our question, and which helps us find the thread that sort of boxes in our tarot story. And then we've already had a physical, intuitive reaction to the individual cards and their relationships together. And if we're smart, we're writing this all down. Now we're going to sort of break this out to just paying attention and focusing on those cards that represent the beginning of our story. And these are the cards that are in the past position. So you can identify these cards because they are in that spread layout position that relates specifically to the past or to the cause of a situation. Often these cards in the layout position will be what caused this, or the cause, or the past, clearly. Also, some cards themselves will reference the past. So even if it is in a present or future position, the card themselves might be talking about past events. And you can often see this in like the 5 of Cups, the 8 of Cups, the 6 of Swords. There's a whole bunch of cards that can relate to the past. So I want you to pay attention to those as well. And then, of course, always, whatever your intuition is telling you, trust it. So even if something is in that future position, but it's a card that you know or you just know and feel relates to the past, trust it. Trust that your intuition is right. Now that you've identified which cards relate to your past, tell yourself a story using just those cards about how you got into the situation you are in today related to the boundaries of your story question or your story thread. And when you're ready to move on, once you know your beginning, you can move to the middle. There will be cards in your spread layout that clearly relate to the present situation. So this is either about the cards themselves, although frankly, most cards can be read in sort of a present tense. You're going to trust your intuition just like you did before. But the spread layout position is mostly going to be those situations or layouts that are related to current events, the present, helpful people, your current feelings, your current beliefs, anything related to right now. You now know your story question, you know your individual card meanings, you trusting your intuition, and you also know how you got yourself into this situation. So now what's going on today? Like what's right now? And concentrate on your beliefs, your thoughts, your feelings, your choices, and your actions, and what you feel about those things. I do have to say, just like in a regular story where Act 1 is about 25%, so the beginning of a story is 25%. Act 3 is about 20 to 25%. So, between the two, you've got half the story told. That means the present, Act 2, is actually twice as long as either one of those. So the majority of the meat here is going to be happening in your present position. This is the fun and the games of all of your story. This is often going to be the most complicated, and the greatest number of cards are being told in this present position. So this is where you're probably struggling the most, and I want you to rely very heavily on your intuition here and what you know to be true, not what you want to be true, not what you believe to be true, but what you know in your knowingest center of truth to be true. And of course, you're writing all this down. So write down what you know about just the present section of your story. And then once you have that down, take a look at how your past brought you into the present. There's almost always a cause and effect relationship, and it's really nice to identify that because that helps sort of tie the story together. All right, and now we're ready to look at the final act, Act 3, our ending of the story. These cards are going to be in the spread layout position that relate to future events, the outcomes or the possible outcomes. Sometimes this is advice, although I almost always put advice in the present sense, but you do you. You can also take a look at the cards themselves. Some cards like the Chariot, the Six of Swords, the Eight of Wands, all of these, and frankly, many, many others, they can all indicate future possibilities. So take a look at those. Also, think through some obvious cause and effect actions that help or that are shown within the tarot cards, and then trust your intuition, of course. Now, write just down about the future section of your story. What is this outcome? If you're reading for divination, what is the future going to happen? What will happen in the future? What is the outcome of the story? If you choose not to read for divination, you're not predicting the future. Instead, you're looking at what is the clear cause and effect. If the past led to the present will lead to this most likely future. Or you could also read it as, what do I want to happen in the future based on the past and present situation? And now read the whole story together. Does it make sense? Is anything missing? Do any of the elements, are they in the right place or do they seem out of place? Can you go even deeper? If you're a writer, you know that the first draft of your story is usually terrible and the magic really happens during the revision phase. So you have this junk and mess of words and story in there somewhere, and then you sort of work on it and make it shiny and then eventually publishable. That's sort of what you're doing here, is like you're taking the raw material, everything you've journaled or talked through. It's way too much information and it's not all useful. Instead, you're going to cull out just those little bits of information that truly tell the story, using your story thread, that through line, as a guide. And then you're going to do a sort of developmental edit or revisions about it to make sure that there's a clear story here that you're able to communicate to yourself. And if you're reading for others, you're able to communicate to other people. Okay, so I have talked about this as if there's really only one way to read multiple cards. It's totally not true. This 3-step beginning, middle, and end is just one framework for reading the cards. And it's an awesome framework because we are storytellers and it's really easy to see the beginning and the middle and the end through most tarot spreads. But you could also try a different framework. And there is another framework that really just focuses on cause and effect. We covered this a little bit during the previous stories framework, but you can look at cause and effect as more like just a straight line. A leads to B, which leads to C, which leads to D. This is really good for 2-card spreads because you don't have that full span of a 3-card story. So you have cause and effect in just 2 cards. And it's also really good for spreads that there's the 12-card zodiac spread. You can tell that as like an overarching story when you're reading that as the houses of the zodiac. It gives you a big picture. But you can also use that same spread to just read it months of the year. So you have 1 card for January, 1 for February, and all 12 months. That's really nice to look at cause and effect because you're looking at these cards over time. So you could go January leads to February, leads to March, and you can see the story then is just A leads to B leads to C. Instead of having a clear beginning, middle, and end, you sort of have multiple beginnings which lead to multiple middles and ends. And you're reading all of those cards sort of individually, but just connected through this through line of cause and effect of time. I've mentioned your intuition so many times in this video. This process of telling a story through the cards, no matter which way or framework you use, but reading multiple cards at a time, it takes practice. It really does. It's not going to happen overnight, but it also requires that you trust and listen to your intuition. Every single person, all of us have this like quiet little voice that knows the truth. And that voice lives inside of us. And I say a voice like it's talking in your head. It's actually using your body to communicate. So you need to sort of translate it, but that it's still telling the truth. Some of us, this physical voice that talks to us, it is so quiet that it's almost not heard. Or we are intentionally, or sometimes even unintentionally, unconsciously, we ignore it. And there's good reasons for ignoring it for some people, but it's sometimes really difficult to trust your intuition until you can hear it. So this next video is going to walk you through some safe ways to learn to identify that quiet voice of your own truth, feeling your intuition inside your body and learning how it communicates with you. And it's going to show you how to use tarot of course, to strengthen and learn and trust that intuition. Tarot is one of the most fantastic tools for getting in touch with your emotions as they physically live in your body. So I love this video. It's one of my favorites. I will go see you there.